Hello, everyone. I'm Gail Garey. Welcome to Let's Save the Planet. This is an online series where we're talking with a number of different experts who are providing easy, everyday tips and actions that we can take to protect this beautiful planet. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today, Ryan Hagen. He is the author of the weekly sustainability newsletter, What on Earth? Ryan is passionate about reversing global warming. He sees it as humanity's #1 priority because it threatens the people we love and the places we call home. He founded Crowdsourcing Sustainability to unleash the power of people everywhere by harnessing the wisdom and the efforts of the crowd to build a healthier, safer, more prosperous, and just society. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Gail. Um, so my professional mission for the last 7 years or so has been to help eliminate greenhouse gases as quickly as possible. Um, and I started focusing on that, honestly, back when I was still in school and needed to figure out what to do with my life. And I wanted to do something meaningful. And so I was just asking the question of how can I do something that I feel good about at the end of the day and that will actually impact a lot of people positively. And after just some quick research, I decided that that issue for me was going to be climate change, and to stop it was going to require eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. And that would help to minimize suffering for people and life on Earth, and also, perhaps more importantly, is maximize quality of life for as many people as possible. Um, so my journey of how I got to here was I started work at a clean technology company called Enernoc, and I worked there for 3 years. And then I left to travel, just ready for a change and wanted to see the world a bit. And I was thinking my next job would be in solar in a low-income country to bring them electricity and also, reduce emissions for those people. But right before I left for my trip, a friend asked me if I would write a blog for him on sustainability. And this really got me thinking. I had so many things I wanted to say. I was really excited to share. And over the course of the trip, I just had this idea keep evolving and developing. And it turned in from one post into I should start a blog myself to I should build a community and an army of climate champions and start to utilize the power of crowdsourcing. Um, so for the past year and a half, past year, I've been working on the project for a year and a half. For the past year almost, I've been building a community through a weekly newsletter, like you mentioned, What on Earth? And I'm basically sharing what I think are the most important things to know on sustainability and climate change, and generally trying to keep things inspiring, giving people actions they can do, and making it like personable, very easy to read and digestible. Not so much doom and gloom, which a lot of the stuff out there is, because I think that's very disempowering. And so I really want to tap into this power of crowdsourcing because I think that is kind of the key and where things are going with the general society and economy. And there's examples like Wikipedia that overtook the encyclopedia in just a couple of years of its invention. If you look at Uber, that's tapping into people's spare resources that aren't being used. Cars are only used like 3 or 4% of the time. The rest of the time they're idle. Uber allows people to use their cars more often. And one I really like is Airbnb as an example, because they have more rooms available now than the top 5 hotel chains combined, and they came out of nowhere. So this power of crowdsourcing, the power of the people, is something we can really tap into, and especially with the internet. And I think that using that tool is something that we should do as much as possible to solve humanity's biggest issue, which is climate change. And kind of to show you the bigger vision of where this is going, like right now I've been building the community, and there's 650 people getting the newsletter from 40 different countries. And right now it's all kind of individuals. I'm empowering individuals and hearing amazing things. I'm just blown away by what people are telling me. But the ultimate vision is to kind of connect the community and build a platform where they can talk to each other, share ideas, ask questions, and also build things together, kind of a springboard for entrepreneurs. But there's another arm. There's so many directions this could go. I kind of want to get myself out of the way and let the community figure it out with me. But I need to build the platform for that. But there's one other thing I'm really excited about the potential for is kind of using the community as a crowd consultant. And so there's this law called Joy's Law, and it says that the smartest people are always going to be outside of your company. And so I want, like, companies, governments, they're all going to have to eliminate their emissions very quickly in the near future, and they don't know how to do that, generally speaking. So if we can tap into sustainability minded people and the power of the crowd to help them solve that problem, I think that's a really good solution and something that we should strive for. So that was probably more than you wanted to know, but that's where I'm at, how I got there, and a little bit about me.
Oh, great. Well, and I'm glad that you touched on kind of the power of crowdsourcing and went into that and, explained kind of how that fits into your vision. So thank you. And as I say, as you're kind of out there and looking and talking and researching, what are some of the actions that you recommend that we all as individuals take to protect this beautiful planet?
Yeah, so the way I kind of break it down is I look at it as things you can do for your individual footprint and things you can do to affect systemic change. I think they're both incredibly important. If I were to weight it and give advice, and this has been changing over time, I used to be much more focused on individual footprint when I first started. And as I've learned more, I've shifted more towards systemic. And I'll go into why a little bit, but if I were to weight it, I'd say, generally speaking, focus on your footprint about a quarter to a third of the time, and the rest think about how you can start changing the systems in which we live, because right now it's so hard to be sustainable. And like, it's good if you minimize your footprint, but we need to figure out the systemic issues that are making this so hard in the first place in order to really solve the problem. And so I'll show you, if I can share my screen, I'll show you the average American's footprint and kind of break it down really quick. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Bear with me. All right, let me know if you can see it, Gail.
I can, yep.
All right.
All right, we can see, yeah, the average US carbon footprint.
Yep. I'm not sure. Can you read any of this? I'll just tell you what it says. So yeah, this is the average US carbon footprint in the US, and that's greenhouse gases, CO2 equivalents. And in the US, that's 19 tons or 20 tons per person, around there. I've seen estimates that make it go up to 25 to 27. It depends on how you calculate it, but this is the general breakdown of what makes up that footprint. And a quick caveat, it's going to be different for everyone. If you live in a city, if you live in a rural area, it's going to be different. So it's best if you look it up yourself, and we can put a link to what I think is the best carbon calculator in the notes at the bottom. But just to put in perspective, 19 tons on average, at 19 tons a year is equivalent to filling up 3 Statues of Liberty's worth of greenhouse gas emissions per person. So that's in itself enormous. And the weight of that is equivalent to 12 cars. So it's just like, it's kind of mind-boggling how much we're each responsible for. But I also don't like that framing, because we live in this system. It's really not our fault that we're doing it. But anyway, to break down what it's made up of, as you can see, travel is typically the biggest source. This is 5 tons on average going to car fuel alone. There's a little section up here that says air travel. That's obviously going to be way bigger if you travel at all. I think this is the equivalent of, so it's average. I think if you take a flight from New York to LA and back, that's about 2 tons on its own, roughly. So if you travel at all by air, this is going to be way bigger. The next biggest part is the home, and within the home, it's electricity. So if you can go solar, that's awesome. You can also buy energy credits, which are a little more expensive, usually 0 to 15% more expensive. They're called RECs. But that's something you can do. You can also get a home energy audit. And then obviously another big impact is the food. So if you eat less meat, that's going to be huge. And if you reduce your waste, those are hugely beneficial, those two. And then for goods and services here, which are the other two categories, the main thing is really to just consume less. Like, don't buy stuff you don't need. And when you can, buy things secondhand. So that's kind of the gist of the typical American's footprint. And to put in perspective, the EU is about half of this on average, around 10 tons per person, and the average world citizen is around 5. Does that help a little bit put that in perspective at all?
That helps a lot. That helps a tremendous amount. And particularly giving us a sense of and the picture of the Statue of Liberty. That's as I say, that really kind of hones in and drives home the point.
Yeah, yeah. To expand on, just drill down a little bit more into the individual versus systemic. There's a recent study that looked at Project Drawdown's top solutions. And if you're not familiar with Project Drawdown, first of all, check it out. It's amazing. They looked at things that are happening now, existing solutions to global warming, and they quantified everything, looking at how many emissions the solution could reduce over the next 30 years, how much it would cost, how much savings there would be, and they ranked them. So super interesting, really useful resource. But there's a study that looked at those top 80 solutions and was like, okay, which of these can an individual do on your own? And they looked at it and they just determined that individual actions alone have the potential to eliminate 20% to 37% of all emissions by 2050, which on the one hand is a ton. And anyone who's saying individual actions don't matter should probably look at that and think about it a little bit. But it also, on the flip side, for people who are only focusing on their own footprint, it should be a bit of a wake-up call, in my opinion, to also see that we need systemic change. You need to start pushing for that, being active citizens, to make that happen. And there's a really good quote, if you don't mind me sharing, by Bill McKibben.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a part of an article I wrote, and I was asking leaders, what is the most effective thing that someone can do to help reverse global warming? And McKibben's answer was, we don't have time for incremental individual changes. Time is just a physical constraint that we're dealing with. And so the most important things an individual can do is to be less of an individual. Join together with other people and movements large enough to affect changes in policy and economics that might actually move the system enough to matter. You can't do it one light bulb, one vegan dinner, one at a time anymore. You should do those things and do them for a whole variety of reasons, like they're the morally right thing to do and they're going to save you money and they're going to make you more healthy and whatever. But don't do them expecting that by doing them, you've somehow done your duty. What we need to be is effective citizens moving policy. Citizenship has not been the thing we've been best at in this country in recent years, and we're paying the price in a number of places. But the most obvious and probably the most long-term damage is what we're doing to the physical systems of the earth. So that's my sense of things. Movements are, history would indicate, the one way we have of standing up to unjust, entrenched power. And so that, I found his answer to be incredibly powerful and kind of eye-opening in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, exactly, right. I mean, certainly, right, we all need to do our part, and I think that's what he's saying, right? But again, there is, there are broader things that we can do, right? So you want to kind of talk a little bit more, in terms of those systemic things and, and options and, and for folks to get involved in?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, I want to go back to the individual stuff really quick.
Okay.
So I went to the chart, but if you were to be working on your own footprint, I think that's important because obviously it cuts out of um, like the 3 statues of liberty each year that we're putting up into the air. But it also sets an example for people around you, and we're influencing more people than we realize. So there's this famous quote by Jim Rohn. It goes something like, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with," which in itself is very useful to think about, of who you're spending time with and all that. But you can also reverse it and understand that you are influencing the people around you. So they're taking in your actions, your ideas, what you value, and that's becoming a part of them. And there have been studies on this that show that it not only impacts your friends and family, but friends of friends, friends of friends of friends, and it's like 3 degrees out. So like people you don't even know are impacting you, and you're impacting them. So these individual changes are important. But when I had mentioned I spoke to these leaders, and I spoke with 16 of them, and if I boiled down their answers into just 4 bullet points, they were these following things. The first was to speak up and to break the climate silence. So talk to people you know about climate change, why it's important to you. Uh, if we're not talking about it, people aren't going to care about it. And if they don't care, they're never going to take action. Um, Also, important caveat on that from what I've learned is to not be preachy, don't shame anyone, uh, be a good listener, and just kind of know that you're not going to change someone's mind in one conversation. It just doesn't work that way. Um, so yeah, just be patient, be inclusive, and try not to let like ego or being right get in the way of stuff. The second thing that they said was to get the right people to represent us in government, and we can do that by voting, obviously. You can also do stuff to help people win their elections. Um, Once people are in office, hold existing reps accountable, push for policies that are in line with what science demands, not what's politically feasible. Some of the big things are carbon pricing, and initiatives like the Green New Deal are excellent. And just like keeping in mind that we need to get to half of our emissions, cut our emissions in half by 2030, and to near zero by 2050. Um, and the last one is to collaborate. This is what Bill was talking about: collaborate, organize with others, and join a movement. Um, because when we work with others is when we can really bring about real change, whether it's in your community or the company you work for, country. We have a much better chance of making systemic changes when we work with other people and we're not a lone voice. So those are kind of the 4 biggest things I can think of. And I didn't think of them. Other people thought of it.
Well, that's good. I mean, thanks for kind of summarizing what you found, and in terms of, again, things that, as you say, we can do kind of beyond the individual actions.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So, you talked about the kind of the project drawdown. Are there other resources that you would recommend for the viewers to um, learn more?
Yeah, totally. So some of my favorite organizations, and some of them have resources, but these are more, well, some of it's resources, some of it's movement. But my favorite organizations right now are Sunrise Movement. That's generally youth oriented, but anyone's welcome to join and support them, obviously. Uh, Another isn't, this one's also youth movement, but Fridays for Future, if you've heard of Greta Thunberg
Mhm.
and what they've been doing. Obviously, that's not a single person, but we can all join them, support them, and encourage that, because that movement's really got some energy behind it, and I'm excited about that. What else? Citizens Climate Lobby pushes for carbon pricing on state and federal levels, and they're international. And this organization I really like because their approach is bipartisan, very respectful, and it's about building relationships. They're pushing for carbon pricing, and the specific resolution's very fair and just and backed by economists. So it's I think, the single most effective thing that we could do. So that's pretty cool. And then for information and resources, a really good group is Climate Reality Project. So this is Al Gore's group. Not only do they have good resources online, but they train people on how to speak. I think do you know anything about them?
Well, a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so they're really good, and they host trainings, and you can sign up to do them, and they'll teach you about global warming and give you the tools to actually present it to your communities and people you know. So I think that one's pretty cool too.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely draw down in terms of solutions based, because they have done tons of peer-reviewed research, and it's not only exciting but just like a great resource to kind of browse and be like, wow, these are ranked, and seeing what's out there and what the future might look like. So that's pretty fascinating.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot, as you say, a lot of different resources, right? Both, and you've named a lot of them in terms of the organizations, as well as kind of online resources and information in terms of ways that, again, we can educate ourselves and kind of go beyond. So, we've talked about a lot of different things. Are there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, if you don't mind, there's actually a video that's only 3 minutes long that I think is pretty cool, and it's amusing, but also inspiring, and makes a good point. So, let me just pull that up real quick. It's it's a TED talk. It's only 3 minutes long, and it's about movement building.
Oh, okay.
But I also at it as just how influential we all are, but not really realizing it, and how jumping into these movements early on is an incredibly powerful action that we can take.
Mhm.
So here we go.
Mhm.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, TED. Thanks.
So yeah, I found that just in the past couple months, and thought it was really really powerful. It actually reminds me of Greta Thunberg, who I mentioned earlier, because she started school striking back last August by herself and did it for weeks on her own. And just just a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, there was a school strike that was global, and it was
Mhm.
something like 125 countries, over 2,000 events, and over 1.5 million people were striking that day. So that's remarkable, and I think really shows the power of being one of those early followers and allowing more people to join in. And to bring it back to climate change in different ways, we're still pretty early in this movement of gaining some social momentum more broadly, and it's coming. But if you can do stuff now to make it come faster, you'll be one of those first followers. And we need as many of those as we can right now.
Mhm. Thanks, Ryan, for sharing that video. I mean, that's one of the things that I've learned throughout the series is there's a lot of great things that are happening in this space, right? There's a lot of good people doing a lot of great things, and so I think, and again, each one of us, right, as individuals, can play a part in that in terms of how we can get involved at a broader scale, right? But also just going back to doing what we can do, right? In terms of our everyday actions. So again, thank you for sharing all of your insights today. Well, I guess we'll kind of wind it up and ask for kind of the one tip that you recommend that each of us take to do what we can, right, to protect this beautiful planet.
Yeah. So my one tip, I kind of have a couple, if that's all right.
I know it's hard, right?
It is hard. I have more of like a philosophy of how to think about this. So I'd like to encourage people to realize that wherever you are is totally fine, and to be kind with yourself about this stuff, because it's pretty easy to be like, oh, like I didn't do this, or I like should have done that. It's like I do it to myself, and it's not worth beating yourself up. You got to be nice to yourself and realize if you're doing your best, that's all that really matters. And at the same time, keep building your impact and keep striving to do more. Keep thinking about what the most impactful things that you can do are. We're all capable of helping out in our own unique way. And that's because we have different skill sets, different experiences, we have different resources, we have different connections to people, and we just need to figure out how to leverage those personal, like everything that we have, and use it to help eliminate emissions in a way that's inclusive and respectful and all that, and just. But yeah, just figuring out what you specifically can contribute and what you can influence is really important, because we need all the people on board that we can get, and this is an all hands on deck effort. So yeah, I don't know. I think also just realizing this isn't like specific action, but also just realizing that this is likely the biggest threat in humanity's history, and we're the last people with a chance to do anything about it. So I try to see that not just as a moral responsibility, but also as a privilege to be working towards something that's this meaningful with our limited time here. So yeah, and just remember that sustainability isn't just about averting this catastrophe, but it's also about building a healthier, safer, and more just world. And that world that we're building is a way better world than we have now. And just to keep that in mind, like we're getting cleaner air and safer and more just, and it's all good if we just imagine it and build it. And yeah, keep your head up, keep fighting.
Good. Well, those are great words to close on. So thank you, Ryan. Thanks for talking with us today and sharing your insights. And thanks for all the work that you're doing in terms of empowering the crowd and bringing people together. Right. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and the idea that you had